Today actually is a special day. I don't know how many people are aware of it. I don't know how many places are going to celebrate it, but today is the Church of the Nazarene's birthday. This day, it started 111 years ago. Now, as Blvd says, this is the 11st birthday of the Church of the Nazarene. I don't know if anybody's really going to... I didn't get an email about it. I knew. But anyway, so happy birthday, fellow Nazarenes. Now, let me tell you, pastors plan differently. We talk about this sometimes when we get together. Some of us are in the habit of opening up the Bible on a Saturday night, looking for the sermon to preach the next morning. This is called the Saturday night special. That's what the pastors call it. When you're working on those, you are praying the whole time. Like, Lord, make it good, and I promise I'll get it done sooner next time. That's pretty much how it goes. Now, if you're bivocational, that's different. Sometimes that's when you do all your prep. But sometimes a full-time preacher is still looking for that Saturday night special, and they're promising. It won't happen again. Just make it good. Other pastors plan months, sometimes a year in advance. I am more of a planner pastor. In my office right now is a game plan and outline of sermons for the rest of 2019. I know, in a pretty good sense where we're headed. I tell you that because sometimes people accuse me or assume that I've written a sermon in response to a specific thing or something that's happened. And that's not the case. As I prepared this sermon that I picked out months ago, I could have already predicted that was going to happen today. So it may hit you on the head, some issues that are going on in your life or our church right now. If that seems pointed or insensitive for whatever reason, let me assure you, I planned this sermon before the summer started, so it wasn't me that made this hit home so directly. All right, it wasn't me. That's all I'm saying. So anyway, we're going to start in 2 Corinthians, chapter 10. I want to read you a few verses 3 through 8. This, of course, is Paul, the Apostle Paul, writing to the church in Corinth, and this is his second letter to them. Here's what he says starting in verse 3. We are human, but we don't wage war as humans do. We use God's mighty weapons, not worldly weapons, to knock down the strongholds of human reasoning and to destroy false arguments. We destroy every obstacle that keeps people from knowing God. We capture their rebellious thoughts and teach them to obey Christ. And after you've become fully obedient, we will punish everyone who remains disobedient. Look at the obvious facts. Those who say they belong to Christ must recognize that we belong to Christ as much as they do. Okay? I may say, he says, I may be boasting too much about the authority given to us by the Lord, but our authority builds you up. It doesn't tear you down, so I will not be ashamed of using my authority. That's what Paul wrote. There are, of course, many things we could talk about in that passage. What I want us to do today and next Sunday is dive into the idea of what verse 5 says. We capture rebellious thoughts. One translation says, we take thoughts captive to obey Christ. Okay. What is happening in our minds is extremely important. The things we're thinking. In the matter of obeying Jesus, the battle is fought and won in our minds. So now let's continue. That's our launching point for all of our discussion today and next Sunday. So I want us to turn to Romans chapter 12. I'm going to read the first 3 verses of that, Romans 12, and this may be a familiar passage to you. I've actually preached from this passage very recently. Now, this is what Paul wrote to the Romans. And so, dear brothers and sisters, I plead with you to give your bodies to God because of all He has done for you. Let them be a living and holy sacrifice, the kind He will find acceptable. This is truly the way to worship Him. Don't copy the behavior and customs of this world, but let God transform you into a new person by changing the way you think. Then you will learn to know God's will for you, which is good and pleasing and perfect. Because of the privilege and authority God has given me, I give each of you this warning. Don't think that you are better than you really are. Be honest in your evaluation of yourselves, measuring yourselves by the faith God has given us. Let God change the way you think. Now, this is a passive statement. Okay, we allow God to do the work. We are passive. Now, we've all been to the dentist. We've all been to the dentist. We've all been in the chair. You lean back and you let the dentist do the work, right? Or the dental hygienist, whoever's doing it. They want to clean your teeth, so you let them. By clenching your jaw and holding your mouth closed. They're supposed to do the work, so you resist at all costs, right? Not getting me. No, that is not how you do it. Dentistry, having dentistry done is also passive, but you participate, we cooperate. That's how you let them do the work. You do what they ask. You do anything that can help in the process. So when we say we want God to change the way we think, He does the work, but we must cooperate. Remember what it said in that first passage, take captive any thoughts that are contrary to what God is doing. I like that imagery now even more. I think about police officers. Police officers take people captive, right? That's part of their job. But they're only in charge that far. Then they take them to a judge who decides what happens, right? They take captive, and someone else makes the ultimate decision. We need to police our minds. We need to know what is expected by reading the law and then holding our thoughts up to that light. We need to hold ourselves accountable to God. And police, they know where to find crimes, right? The seedy bars and the back alleys. This is where they hang out because they know that's where crime tends to happen. Well, we know when our thoughts need policing. Maybe we need to take control of our mind when we're watching TV and no one else is around. Maybe we need to take control of our mind when we're reading about everyone else's fake lives on Facebook and we start to get judgmental and jealous. Maybe we need to police our minds when we're watching the news and we start to get angry or calling people names. We know when we tend to let thoughts that are unpleasing to God have their way in our head, and we need to patrol those times. We need to take those thoughts captive. And then we need to take them to the judge. Say, God, what would you have me do with this? Should I let this thought be the thing that controls me right now? Should I let this thought be my deciding influence for the rest of the day? And God says yes, or God says no. You might ask, am I just supposed to become some sort of robot who doesn't have any thoughts of my own? Am I just supposed to let God just do whatever He wants up here? And Paul said, I plead with you. That's what he said. I plead with you to give your bodies to God as a living sacrifice. A living sacrifice. Now, see, I'm afraid if I try to explain exactly what that is, I don't think I can possibly make it sound good to a person who is clinging to their own freedom. So ask yourself, what does it mean to be a living sacrifice? When we think of sacrifices, we think of death, don't we? Animals sacrificed on the altar in the Old Testament, that's a sacrifice. You kill the animal. I've thought about the 10 or 12-point bucks that are on some of your walls right now. And that some of you have a spot on your wall where there's no buck and you're ready to find that buck and put it up there. An animal sacrificed to the hunter, but then celebrated as a symbol of what the hunter can do. Think about that. Would you be a living sacrifice? Would you allow yourself to be made new and then put on display for all to see what the Almighty can do? A living sacrifice is turned over to God for His purpose. It doesn't have to die to be His. It is simply called to die to itself. That's what Scripture says. Die to yourself. But how? How do we do that? Well, let's hear what Jesus said about honoring God with your thoughts. He talked about it a little bit in Matthew chapter 5. Matthew 5, I'm going to read 21 through 30. You've heard that our ancestors were told you must not murder. If you commit murder, you're subject to judgment. But I say if you are even angry with someone, you are subject to judgment. If you call someone an idiot, you're in danger of being brought before the court. If you curse someone, you're in danger of the fires of hell. So if you are presenting a sacrifice at the altar in the temple, and you suddenly remember that someone has something against you, leave your sacrifice there at the altar, go and be reconciled to that person, then come and offer your sacrifice to God. When you're on your way to court with your adversary, settle your differences quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to an officer, and you'll be thrown into prison. And if that happens, you surely won't be free again until you have paid the last penny. You've heard the commandment that says you must not commit adultery, but I say anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. So if your eye, even your good eye, causes you to lust, gouge it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your hand, even your stronger hand, causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one part of your body than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. Wow. It is better to lose one part of your body than to be thrown into hell. A living sacrifice dies to self. Jesus says it's better to let that go. Let that thing be gone from you. You lose those thoughts that allow you to ruminate and marinate in sin. Oh, I'm just going to think about, I'm so angry right now. I'm just going to let this go. I'm going to think about what I'd like to say. I'm not going to say it, I'm a Christian, but I'm going to think about what I would say. Oh, if they'd have met me when I was younger, I'd have said this to them. I'd have done this to them. And they'd know, I'd slashed their tires. I slashed many a tire when I was younger. I'm not doing that now. Jesus saved my soul. But I'll tell you what, I wish I could. Get me a time machine. Those thoughts are the beginning of sin. In fact, he said anger is murder. He said looking lustfully is adultery. Well, those thoughts are sin. But the truth is only God can make that happen. Only God can change your thoughts. That's why Paul said in the beginning, we have to let him change our minds. And when you allow God to change your thoughts, you become a beautiful symbol of what God can do. You become a 95-point buck there on the wall. Look what God can do. Do you know that dude slashed my tires and look at him now? That is what God can do. But when we believe the lies that we are told, like you can look but don't touch, or what I'm thinking isn't hurting anyone, we carry sin. And what's worse, when we carry sin and we also carry the banner of Christ over a life of fresh, unapologetic sin, then we testify to the world that God has no power. When you tell the world, yeah, I'm a Christian, Jesus saved my soul, but you're lucky. When we have that anger and resentment in us, when we carry that sin and we also tell people that Jesus has saved us, what we tell them is, by the way, Jesus didn't do nothing for me, but changed the way I behave. Jesus is just a list of rules. There's no power, there's no help. It's just a law, it's just a burden. What would you do, saint of the church, to stop your testimony from declaring that God has no power? Would you cut off your hand? Would you gouge out your eye? Now, this text has never been believed to be literal. Let's make that clear. It's not for that. But if God could suggest these ideas, it is sure that we should be willing to sacrifice our thoughts. The first step of every wrong thing that has ever been done was a thought. In fact, the second step is another thought. We have to let a thought take shape before our actions ever start. That is why God says to take them captive. Don't let them ruminate and marinate in their unholy nature. Have you ever had someone ask you why you responded one way instead of another? Like, why didn't you just smack that secretary right in the mouth for talking to you like that? You've probably said this before. Well, it never even crossed my mind. Why didn't you do that? Never even crossed my mind. Crossing your mind means a thought starts and is allowed to travel throughout your mind. It is given free, full reign to go. It isn't captured. That's why it was allowed and enabled to cross your mind. Maybe we need to cross our mind with the cross of Christ. That's a little too cute, isn't it? But it's there. I had to mention it. It's a little too word play-ish. We die to self and become a living sacrifice. And then we let Jesus decide which thoughts are worth holding on to. And he decides what crosses our mind. What we need is our takeaway thought, our concept today, is what we think is neither unimportant nor is it always okay. It's just a thought, it's always okay. It's a thought, it doesn't matter. It's not true. It was never true. If we're going to be followers of Jesus, we're going to have to surrender our thoughts. It's going to be hard. Now let me tell you, God gave us a brain to use, every one of you. Even some of you don't have the best ones, but they're still yours with intention to be used. A mind to explore and discover. I'm not arguing that we stop thinking when we turn to Jesus. I'm absolutely not. I'm arguing that we use our minds the way God intended. We use them to build and to restore life. We use them to celebrate and encourage every good thing. We use them to heal what is hurt and to find what is lost. We can only do those things when we surrender to the one who gave us our minds, when we accept the call to be living sacrifices. The band's going to come, and we're going to sing a song and go. Think about this, and know that the thoughts you have matter. If you walk out of here thinking, that kid doesn't know what I know, that guy's always talking about this and that, he's got a whatever life, and he's all that stuff. You think that stuff, and some of it's true, and some of it's false. But if you choose to let those thoughts be the thing, then they will be born in the way you respond. But if you think, well, he started with Scripture, the Bible seems to agree, I'm going to see where I measure up to this, then it will also take life. It will also have results. And God will be honored when you consider what is true and take your thoughts captive.